Okay, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. So, welcome to tonight's, I'm hesitant to say lecture, because if you came thinking that it's just going to be a one-way talk, you might be disappointed, right? So, the topic that was advertised, can someone remind me what the topic was? Anyone know what the topic was? Islam has all the logical answers. Okay, you're close. Oh, really? MashaAllah. So the topic was something in the realm of, are all questions related to Islam, or all doubts related to Islam, do they have rational answers? Okay? Now the reason that I kind of decided to speak about this, and it is actually this afternoon during the Jum'ah khutbah. How many people were here for the khutbah? Okay, you guys are here. So you remember Shaykhana was speaking about what was he speaking about? The etiquettes of the masjid. Good, people were paying attention. So you remember one of the etiquettes of the masjid is when you walk in, what foot do you walk in with? The right foot, okay? And what that reminded me of was that one time I was asked to do a fundraiser. And the keynote speaker, he had spoken about the etiquettes of the bathroom. And I didn't really know who the keynote speaker was. The organization that had called me out, they said, look, he's a good speaker, he's very knowledgeable, and so on and so forth. And I remember that as he was speaking, he was well spoken, but he started to say things which, at a certain point, I almost fell off my chair. So let me give you an example. So one of the things he mentions, he says that, look, what we need to do is we need to be really critical when it comes to our sources. When it comes to Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah, we have to be people that are open-minded, that are critical. And he goes, I remember one time when my son was about to enter the bathroom, and he was standing there crying. And I asked him, I said, son, what's going on? What happened? He said, Baba, I can't figure out which one is my left foot. Now, if I heard that, or if one of my children did that, I would say, okay, well, you know what? You just, at this point, it doesn't matter. Just go in, do what you need to do, and then we'll talk about it later, typically. And in a sense, I may even be a bit proud that my son at this age has a level of taqwa of Allah Azza wa Jal. But what he said, and this is what basically I almost fell off my chair, he said, isn't it ridiculous that this young child is crying because he's trying to figure out which one is his left foot based upon a narration of the Prophet ﷺ, which makes no rational sense. And like I said, this is where I was like, wait a minute, what? He said, so narrations like this, if they don't fit with the rationale, we must throw them away. A'udhu billah. So like I said, I almost fell off my chair because I was like, wait a minute, what did he just say? And the rest of the talk just proceeded like this. Now, by the way, if you think this is a dated example, I'm talking about, last year, 2016. And I didn't think people actually had this type of mentality. But what it underscores is this idea that even for people that are practicing, people that understand the value of the Quran and the Sunnah, a lot of times we ourselves say it has to now make sense to us. Otherwise, how can we now accept it? And that's really what I wanted to kind of speak about. But before I do that, as we get into the topic tonight, the organizers had asked me to keep it very simple. And I have to say that I will try my best to keep it simple. But let me qualify that a lot of the questions we're going to be exploring tonight, some of these questions are very abrasive, maybe abrasive for some of you. Maybe they may even make you a bit uncomfortable. But in order to deal with those questions in a way that is appropriate, in a way we're able to now get to the root of the issue, I will have to get a little bit technical. But that being said, I'll try my best not to get too technical, all right? And by the way, technical doesn't equal boring, just letting you know, because I do want this to be a discussion. So let me open it up right now. And let me give you a scenario. And I'm going to kind of walk around, and I've got this thing for you guys to have this conversation. I want you to imagine now that there is a very fast train or trolley or something like this, okay? And you're in this train or in this trolley. It's going very fast down the track. And you realize that in front of you are 5 people. And you're going to hit these people, and they're going to die. No question about it. Now you look off to the side, and you see that if you just turn, you can get on another track, but at the end of that track, there's one person. So the question I have for you is, what do you do? Do you let it go and kill 5 people? Or do you weave off to the right and you kill one person? And you can't stop the train, the brakes are gone. Right? So what do you do? No, let me get some hands here. Let's see. What do you do? You go and kill one person. Okay. Anybody else? What's that? Save the 5 and kill the 1, right? Yeah, you'll be okay. Don't worry. Inshallah. He's like, as long as I'm good. All right. Anybody else? Would anyone let the train keep going or the trolley keep going? Yes, I will actually ask you. Yes, the 1 or the 5? Yusuf. Depends on, you don't know them. They're all strangers. You let the 5 go. Okay. All right. How many people? Yes, go ahead. Nope, that's it. You've got either the 5 or the 1. That's it. You'll go through the 5. Okay. How many people, let me ask, the sisters. How many sisters, actually, let me hear from the sisters. What would you do? Would you kill the 1 or you'd kill the 5? Yes. You'd do the 1. Okay. How many people would kill 5? Raise your hands. Would kill 5 people. Just let it go. Meaning you just take your hands off the steering. It is. So I have 1. Any amongst the sisters? I don't see any. How many people would do 1? Raise your hands. Okay, I think it's the majority. So we have a minority. We have 1 person that would kill 5. Now here's the question. Why would you sacrifice 1 for 5? Who wants to help me out with that? Who wants to answer that? Sisters, why would you sacrifice 1 over 5? I need to be a little bit louder. 1 is less than 5. Okay, so it's a numerical idea. Okay, anybody else amongst the brothers, why would you sacrifice 1 over 5? Those 5. So what if you end up finding out that those 5 people end up to be murderers? I'm just saying, you're assuming value. You don't know them, right? Your assumptions. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in on why let the 1 guy die and save the 5? Why would you do it? I mean, it's logical. Okay, why? Why is it logical? What do you mean by that? How is it logical? It's just logical. Okay, he's going to hang that in abeyance. Just logical. All right, let me change the example around. Let's now assume that you're standing on a bridge and you see this trolley and it's going downwards and it's about to kill 5 people. And you almost feel helpless. And you're looking at this fast-moving trolley. It's going to hit these 5 people. You're like, man, they're going to die. And next to you is standing an enormously large, fat man. And if you just kind of pushed him over, he would fall, die, but he'd block the train. And you'd save the 5 people. What do you do now? Do you push him over? Let the 5 die. Okay, but you were willing to do that in the first place. What's the difference between the first example and the second example? Wait, one at a time. Yeah. Okay? But in this case, you don't have a choice either. So you're saying 5 versus 1. Okay. Yes. Okay. It's Allah. It's, of course, it's Allah's decision no matter what you do. Okay. But how is this case different than the first case? Because you have a choice. You can either kill 1 person or 5. But in this case, you still have a choice. You have a choice, right? You can either push the guy, and that's your choice. It's the intention. Okay. Yes. A raffle. You got to make a split-second decision. You can't do a raffle. Those 5 they're oblivious. Let's say their backs are towards you. Like they don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's a track, let's say. Meaning, you just don't know. You're at a distance. You don't know. But that's what I'm trying to say now is in one case, you would sacrifice 1 to save the 5. In the next case, you would go ahead and let the 5 die. And you have to ask, what is the difference between the two? Well, yes. But nevertheless, the result is the same, right? In terms of the consequence is exactly the same. The choice is different. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. But isn't it in both cases you're doing it yourself? Meaning you have a choice in both cases, 1 versus 5. What's the difference in choice 1 and choice 5? That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, you don't, but then you sacrifice the 5. No, you're sure. Like the guy is really big. Meaning he's massive. And you don't even need just a little bit of push and he's gone. Yes. Last one. Yes. You will kill nobody. How would you do that? If you can, but you can't. Well, that's different. Yes, last one, last comment. You're doing what? You're doing a crime. Okay. 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 So when you say crime, do you mean crime according to like Islamic law, or you mean crime according to U.S. constitutional law? Any crime. Okay, so but if it wasn't illegal, then like if there's no worry about a crime, like you don't have to worry about it. They're still forming their laws. What would you do? That's the point. Okay. Now, before we get too carried away, so the reason I'm highlighting this is because when we look back and you had the questions in the Western world related to questions of morality, questions about moral choices, right? There was a lot of philosophers that came up with how exactly do we make these moral choices. And the example that I just gave you, and as a lot of you picked 5 over the 1 in the first example, this is what's known as utilitarianism. The very famous Jeremy Bentham expounded upon this and said, look, anytime you're going to make a decision, a moral decision, it's going to be based on the consequences. And you're going to basically look at what is the total utility you have, meaning what is your total pleasure out of something versus what is the total harm. And as long as the pleasure is greater than the harm, you go for it. Everyone understand me? Okay? But in case number 2, there's something stopping you from pushing that guy over, even though the consequence is the same. So the question now arises, what is that thing that was stopping you? Now from our perspective, as Muslims, that's different, right? We have, obviously, you can't kill a person, with intention and all of that. But if we took Islam out of the picture, you would find that people still have a moral issue with pushing that guy over. And the question then arises, well, why? If the consequence is the same, then why do you have this issue? All right. Now, what does this have to do with what I want to speak about? So let's take a look at some of the issues related to the topic itself. Some of those issues are, for example, a Muslim may come, right? Young Muslim, he comes, he says, what I don't understand, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put certain desires within a human being that causes them to have an attraction with the same gender and then not give him an outlet and say that that's haram? That to me doesn't make sense. Do you get what I'm saying now, right? And it's related to whatever gender you want to speak about, the LGBT with the new letter Q added to it, right? So now, what we find here is there's this moral incongruence. There's a moral issue now. And that moral issue has to do with failing to understand some of the foundations of Islam, in fact, right? And that's really what we want to get to. So if someone came to you and they gave you this issue, what do you tell them? Some of the sisters, young sister comes to you and she says, you know what? I don't really understand why Allah would do that. How can I believe in a religion that is just doesn't make sense to me morally? What do you say? Sisters. Or you just tell her like, astaghfirullah, that's haram, get out of my face. What do you say? Let me see some hands, because I need one at a time. Yes. Allah's all-knowing. So we trust Him. Okay. Now the question arises that, well, you say that Allah's all-knowing, but my issue is that it still doesn't make sense to me. In other words, it doesn't make sense. So how am I supposed to believe in a God that's supposed to be merciful, and yet He would do this to another human being? I mean, isn't He merciful? Isn't He loving? Who wants to take that? Nobody, huh? So if a young person comes to you, you're like, you know what? I'm going to take you to the masjid, you can go talk to Fahad. Right? The question is, they follow up, right? And they say, look, Allah is the all-knowing. That's what the sister said, that Allah is the all-knowing and we put our trust upon Allah, right? What if the person says, look, I don't really understand, right? That may be, they have this issue when they call the God of the gaps, right? In between. So what I don't understand is, why is it, what kind of a God would allow something so unjust? In other words, if that desire is in the human being, then why can't they act upon it? That's something that our entire society accepts as being just. So what kind of a God would do something like that? Crickets, yeah. It has a law, yes. Yeah. They have to do it by the law. Well, it comes from people. Okay? But that's the doubt now. That how exactly, so if that's the case, how can I believe in such a God who is unjust? Do you understand? The question isn't that, okay, I believe in God and therefore God said it and I'm going to do it. Okay, all right. But that's predicated on the belief in God, right? And what's being shaken here is that very foundation. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, that person is already very wishy-washy when it comes to they follow the law. Well, because the law didn't create them. Okay, so now you're going to the foundations. Like basically, why do you believe in Allah? Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay, let me throw another one out there, just for kicks. Let's assume now someone comes and they say, look, I went to one of my professors. He's a geology professor. And the Quran says, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا, that the mountains are like pegs. And my geology professor, he says, this is completely off. It's wrong. Because according to what we've found scientifically, what we find is that mountains aren't like pegs. There's actually tectonic plates that are underneath the earth, and that's basically how it's arranged. So your book, there seems to be an issue with it. So what do you do with that? Who wants to take that one? I need you to start calling on people. Yes. The Quran proves science. So the Quran proves a lot of science. But what happens when science contradicts it? So the science is wrong. Okay, so do you believe it's flat? Right. That's risky, by the way. We can get into a little bit of issues, but we'll save that for later, inshallah. But okay, I got what you're saying. All right. What I'm trying to expound upon here is that you find that there are a number of issues that would shake people to the core. Meaning, either they could be moral issues, some sort of moral incongruence. They could be issues with, let's say, science. They could be issues with things like the problem of evil, for instance. Right? Someone would go through something traumatic in their life, and they'd ask themselves, why would God do that to me? Right? So, what I wanted to look at tonight is we want to understand a couple of things. First, we want to understand the moral aspect, in the sense that where exactly do morals come from? And second, we wanted to basically look at rationality itself. Because a lot of the things that you find in various areas, whether you're talking about philosophically, scientifically, you find that there's a limit to rationality. All right? How many people, let me just get a show of hands, how many people think that Islam can answer questions, or Islam can answer any question rationally? Okay, how many people think that's, okay, so you think they can answer rationally? Anybody else? You do? Okay. How many people say that's not true? That Islam does not have a rational answer to everything? Okay, good. When you think about rationality, imagine now that I told you that I'm a married bachelor. All right? I came to you and I said, guess what? I'm a married bachelor. What would you say to me? You're contradicting yourself, right? And before, like, the brothers start off and say, well, the thing is, in Islam, you can have 4 women, so therefore, technically, a bachelor is someone who's not married, and someone who's married is not a bachelor. But let's say, so, now that's clearly something that's illogical, yes? Okay. What if I said, no, I don't care what you say, I'm a married bachelor, hands down. Now what? Why? Based on what? So what? But how are you going to prove that? I don't agree with the principle. Isn't this based on a logical principle, right? A bachelor is someone who's not married, and someone who's married is married. But I think you can be a married bachelor. Okay, that's fine. I don't mind. I like oxymorons. No problem. A trick? I don't need a trick. It is what it is, man. I have no problem with it. Well, I say it is. Convince me otherwise. Let me give, yeah. Some norms, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in other words, you can't really go anywhere from there. Right. To you, your religion, to me, my religion, khalas, right? All right. Here's the thing. What this is based upon is a logical principle, the principle of mutual exclusivity, right? That you cannot have something be and not be at the same time. right? I cannot be fahad and not fahad at the same time. This is a logical principle. The issue is, if someone does not agree with your logical principle, you can't move forward. If someone says, I don't believe in this logical principle, khalas, you're done, right? The point is that when you look at rationality, people generally categorize rationality into two categories. Something is either rational or irrational, right? So, they brought me a board, they didn't bring me markers. All right. So, you have things that are rational, like a simple statement, like I am Fahad. That's a rational statement. You have things that are irrational, which is the statement I said, I'm a married bachelor. Or, I love looking at square circles. Whatever it might be. Those are irrational statements. But then, those statements are built upon logical principles. And those logical principles are outside of rationality. Everyone with me? Meaning, without those logical principles, rationality doesn't work. Is he looking for markers? Okay. So, in fact, rationality has three categories. You have those things that are irrational, they don't make sense. You have things that are rational, those things that make sense. And then you have those things that are supra-rational. Those things that are outside of rationality, which if they weren't there, rationality itself would fall down. Can I just use a Sharpie? No, I'm kidding. All right, don't worry about it, it's fine. Okay, so we said that rationality has three categories. You have that which is outside of rationality, which rationality is based upon. You have rationality, and then you have those things that are irrational. Everyone with me so far? So logical principles are in that category, which is known as the supra-rational, that which is outside of rationality. You have logical principles as part of that. Without that, rationality doesn't work. Other elements that are part of the super-rational are things like aesthetic tastes. You go see a beautiful sunset, and you tell your friend, you're like, man, that's beautiful. And he says, that's ugly. Where are you going to go with that? Right? It's not a rational concept. It's something that lies outside of rationality. Okay? You have things like smells. You smell something, you smell a good perfume of some sort, and you say, that smells really good. And someone's like, man, that smells like the toilet. Well, where are you going to go? You can't argue that point. Because your sense of smell, what smells good and what smells bad, is part of the super-rational. Those are not things that you can now prove rationally. Now, so you understand we have super-rational, rational, and irrational. Okay? Oh, you bought the marker. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. So you have things that are supra-rational. The colorful ones, okay. Super-rational, rational, and irrational. Okay? So things that are in this category, you can't necessarily prove. But without them, rationality doesn't work. Other elements in the super-rational are things like moral principles, or what we may call those things that are objectively moral. Now, what do I mean by objectively moral? Objectively moral are those moral principles, those moral things that no matter what your desire is, no matter what the whims of society are, no matter what the majority says, they will always be, they're right, basically. So I'll give you an example. Imagine now that there was some island where murdering a person is completely okay, murdering him without without justification. You can just go kill people. Is that morally correct? How many of you say that's okay? Okay. No one does, right? Even though every single person on that island, the majority, everyone on that island, says that, killing someone without justification is perfectly okay, does it make it okay? Yes or no? It does not make it okay. That is what's known as an objectively moral principle. It doesn't matter whether the population says so. It doesn't matter whether your own whims say so. The point is, it is objectively moral. And that objectively moral principle, that objectively moral statement, needs a moral anchor. Otherwise, it becomes mutable, it becomes subjective. That moral anchor, it has to be Allah. Now you may say, wait a minute, wasn't that a logical jump? Let me ask you this. What else could be an anchor for objective morals? If you have something that's morally, it's outside of your subjective sense of morality, right? Certain things you decide that are moral, immoral, based on the society, based on your own whims, but there's certain things that lie outside, and those are objectively morals. What is the anchor for that? How do you justify that? Like, for example, remember the guy that we said you can't push him over? The fat guy? Well, why? Why can't you push him over? Because if you go down the route of consequentialism, utilitarianism, then it should be an easy choice. You kick him down and he's gone. But something stops you, whether you're Muslim or not Muslim or whatever the deal is, and that's what we call objective morality. You don't necessarily have a rational reason for that, because if you do a calculation, you're still saving 5 people. But it has to have an anchor. It has to have a reason. What is that anchor? Now some people, they say, okay, well, one of those anchors is biology. That our morals, in order to understand our morals, that we can basically look at our biology, right? So people that are study evolution and things like that, they say, well, we can get objective morals from biology. Anyone see a problem with that? Morals from biology. Yeah. Why? Okay. Okay. Okay, but okay, let me give you so is mutable. Okay, but what I'm saying, okay, so here's what I'm saying. Putting that argument aside for a second, right? So that's a science argument. We'll put that aside for a second. Let's say someone says, you know what? You can observe in certain species of the animal kingdom animals that are homosexual. And so therefore, it's a natural thing. So why can't we do it? That is objectively moral in my eyes. What's the problem with that? Or is there a problem with it? Is it like, okay, no, it's fine. Biology can determine your morals, your objective morals. Okay, so someone that, let's say someone that says, no, actually, I basically follow the evolutionary model, and I don't see that there's much of a difference, right? I mean, you have monkeys, and then eventually over time, they evolved, and now you had humanoids, and now you have humans. So getting our morals from a biological source is not a problem at all. But what's the problem with that rationale? No, but you're saying, okay, well, that's the reason you have objective morals. Okay. But we're talking about morals, though. We're not talking about actions. So it's two different things, right? We're not saying like you should do whatever a monkey does, but we're saying that basically our biology Where do you go with that? Okay. So you're basically, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that basically humans are just different than animals. And so how can you justify your morality from animals? Is that what you're saying? It's two different species. Okay. All right. But let's say someone says, well, we evolved from them. So our sense of morality, and again, we're talking about objective morals, developed just like the human being developed. What's the problem with that? Okay. Well, okay, so what is your alternative? No, then where do we get objective morals? You have to pretend I'm not a Muslim. So higher up. Okay, good. Even the animal doesn't do that. You're making a point here. So the point is, look, you have certain actions within animals that if you took the biology example, you'd be in trouble. For example, the nurse shark, it wrestles with its mate. If you took that as a moral standard, then rape would be okay. But you don't. Because everyone accepts that something that is objectively immoral is something like rape. But yet, you have within the animal kingdom, they do that. In fact, let me read for you a quote from Charles Darwin. Anyone know who that is, right? Everyone knows who that is? Okay. It's very interesting that he himself gave the idea that that would be problematic. So listen to what he says. He says, if men were reared under precisely the same conditions as hive bees, there can hardly be a doubt that our unmarried females would, like the worker bees, think it a sacred duty to kill their brothers, and mothers would strive to kill their fertile daughters, and no one would think of interfering. So hive bees, right? I guess there's a queen bee. They basically kill off other bees. And so therefore, if that's the case, and our objective morality is defined by biology, well, you've got a big problem. Because things that you consider objectively moral, and you took that from the animal kingdom, you're in trouble. Right? There's many examples like this. What if someone says, okay, our objective morals come from society? The society around you tells you that it's okay if you want to be a homosexual. What's wrong with that? Can we get objective morals from society? No. Yes, we can. Okay, justify. Why? Why do you say that? Okay. So you're saying that something that is objectively moral, its basis, its anchor, can be society. Okay. Okay. So you're actually supporting the position. You're saying that society can, not you personally. Right. So society can give us those things that are objectively moral. Now look, let me remind you guys what we mean by objective morality. Just by its definition, objectively moral things are those things that are either right or wrong objectively. They are outside of human subjectivity. Right? So meaning that if everyone decided tomorrow that rape is okay, it would still be wrong. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay, so can then society give us objective morals? Well, I'm asking you that. Yeah. Yes. It makes sense. So you have no problem with pushing them over. Yeah. Well, that's my question, right? I'm saying, as a Muslim, that the moral anchor to those things that are objectively moral is Allah. And I'm asking you to give me an alternative position, right? I'm saying that the only reason you have objectively moral things is because of Allah Azza wa Jal. That's my position as a Muslim. Right? In terms of we're dealing with morals here now, right? Those things that are objectively moral, that are not subject to humans, that are not limited to human subjectivity. Those things are outside of limited human subjectivity. The only way to justify those, to give them a moral anchor, is Allah Azza wa Jal. That's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that when people come and argue and they say, okay, no, there's another moral anchor, I'm saying one argument is biology, one argument is society. Right, so we're done with biology. So now we're on to society. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. This is how I feel. Okay. But I'm asking not only do I feel, I'm asking what's the alternative, right? Yes. Well, hold on. Yes. Nice and loud. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you rationalize it? Not logically. So where do you think that morality lies? It lies outside of the rationale. It's in the super rational. Let me give you some Islamic terms so you guys aren't. And he actually hit the nail on the head. So this is fitra. All right. What we call the super rational in Islamic terms is the fitrah. So far, so good. Now, hopefully, that may be clearing up things. 1 second. The rational, that's obviously aql. And then that is just غير aqli or non-aqli, right? Aql, that's the rationale. Okay? Now, when it comes to this idea of the super rational, we said that there's a number of ideas that lie in the super rational. The number of ideas that lie in the fitrah. And that without them, this falls apart. And this falls apart also in the realm of objective morality. You cannot have something be objectively moral unless you have something in the super rational. Until you accept that there's something outside of rationality that you have to hang your hat on. Everyone with me so far? Okay. Now this super rational, let me give you a couple of examples. How many people have been in Hajj or Umrah? Raise your hand. Okay. Raise your hands again. How many people have been in Hajj or Umrah? Okay. So, when you saw the Kaaba for the first time, how did you feel? What was your reaction? Overwhelmed. Okay. If you spoke to, let's imagine they resurrected Jeremy Bentham. Okay? He's the utilitarian. He would ask you the question, why did you feel overwhelmed? A spiritual thing. Okay, so there's no rationality tied to it. Because according to him, what you're looking at when you see the Kaaba is a cube. Dude, you're seeing a black box. That's all you're seeing. Yes. Okay. Okay, good. Let me ask you this. Have you guys been to Niagara Falls? No? Oh, you have your parents take you, man. Let's see, what else? Grand Canyon. Yeah, how did you feel when you saw the Grand Canyon? You don't? All right. You know, I wish there was something in Houston that I could point to, you know, other than the water wall, but that really doesn't give you a sense of awe at all. Anyway, so my point is, look, when you actually go to certain things that are outside of you, that just seem to have this kind of grandeur about them, you have this intense sense of awe. That sense of awe, it's not an irrational sense. It's a super rational sense. And in fact, there's some research, there's an article in Psychology Today where they spoke about the people that experience more awe are in fact happier than those that don't experience awe. In other words, someone that's in touch with their fitrah is generally a happier person. Okay? All right. Let's take this a little bit further. Let's develop this a little bit further. If we say that we can explain everything rationally, okay? We enter into another problem, and that is, what is the alternative? Let's say someone says, I don't believe in the super rational. We can explain everything just by rationality. The problem with that is that if you're going to explain everything with your rationale, you would have to ask the question, why about something? So if I asked you, okay, you know, why do you do such a thing? You say, well, it's because of this. And they say, okay, why do you do that? Well, it's because of this. It's like I give the example. Imagine my son, he comes and he takes out a knife. And I say to him, I say, look, you got to put that away. He says, why? I said, well, because it's sharp. He says, why? I said, well, because they manufactured it like that. He said, well, why? I said, well, because it's used for cutting. He says, well, why? I said, because you use it to cut fruit. He's like, well, why? I was like, because fruit tastes better. He's like, well, why? At a certain point, I just have to say, because I said so. That's why. Because you cannot ask why infinitely. Any theorem, it cannot be infinitely defendable. You cannot keep asking why, because of this, because of this, because of this, because of any theorem. Even in the realm of science, you cannot have a theorem that is infinitely defendable. You have to have a stopping point. You have to have a point that is outside of rationality. Because if you say that every single thing is rational, that's self-defeating. In other words, if you say that I can explain the reason for everything, you've got a problem, because you will always need something outside of whatever you have to explain that thing. The way I usually explain it to people, I say, imagine now someone comes to you and says, I have a solvent that can dissolve anything. It is the perfect solvent, right? So now this solvent, you could basically pour it onto your driveway, it'll clean it all off. You can take it to your kitchen, it'll clear out the oven, and you can basically take it anywhere. In fact, if you're ever in jail, you can just pour it on the cell and it'll just dissolve out and you can just get through. It's the perfect solvent. It dissolves everything. But there's a problem now. You want to ask the person, what bottle will you keep that solvent in? It can't dissolve everything. The rationale is an excellent solvent, but you need a bottle to keep it in. And that bottle is what we call the fitrah. And so many things, so many issues that you come down to when it comes to issues of morality, a lot of the questions that we face comes down to not understanding the difference between the rational and the super rational. Assuming that you can now solve everything rationally, when in fact that is an impossibility on any thought system. Any thought system. Everyone with me so far? Yes, really quick. It probably could. All right. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that though. All right. So everyone understand the concept of the super rational and the rational? Yeah? Okay. Where does the concept of Allah fall into? Do you think it falls into this category or this category? This category. How many people say it falls into the super rational? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A lot of, okay. How many people say that the category of Allah falls in the rational? So if someone says, prove to me that God exists, and it's a super rational concept, and one of the things we said about the super rational is that it's outside of rationality, can you prove that? Can you prove that? Can you use your rationale to prove the existence of Allah? So that's why many times when you look to the Quran, for instance, how many ayat are dedicated to addressing the atheists? How many? Who can tell me? Anyone know? How many ayat? A lot? Okay, give me 3. Is that a rational argument? Yani, when I mean a rational argument, I'm talking about like a discursive reasoning, right? A, B, therefore C. I don't know, man. But again, is that giving you a rational argument or is that giving you a super rational argument? It's two different. Super rational, right? I'm saying in this realm, what they call discursive reasoning, right? You say A, B, therefore C, like deductive reasoning, right? You say you have premise A, premise B, therefore C, right? The Quran doesn't have that when it comes to Allah Azza wa Jal. I mean, it has maybe 1 or 2 instances of that, right? One instance is, were they created from nothing? Or did they create themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? That's one type of discursive argument if you're going to take it at that. أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ إِلَى الْآخِرِ. Right? That's one ayah. The other ayah, maybe, أَفِي اللَّهِ شَكٍّ. Is there any doubt concerning Allah? But even that, I would say, That's a fitri argument. It's a super rational argument. The reality is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives more intellectual weight to the mushrikeen, to the Christians, to the Jews, to the other religions, gives more intellectual weight to them than He does to the atheists. Because atheism at its core is a spiritual problem. It's not necessarily a rational problem. And this is where a lot of times people get caught up. They start thinking that this is a let me prove to you that God exists, and they end up trying to use the rationale and they just go around in circles. Well, I hope not the people that are trying to do that. Yes, that's true, in a sense. Well, they have a brain, but they are. Okay, let me ask you one other thing. The term ayah. All right. Starts with A. That's why it's atheist. The term ayah, what does this mean? A sign. Anybody else? What's an ayah? A sign. Anybody else? Generally, it's translated as a sign, right? That's how we know what an ayah. That's what we say when we think of ayah. Think of sign. The term ayah, it's trilateral root. For those of you studying Arabic, what is the trilateral root to ayah? If you break it down, you guys know what trilateral roots are for this? Who's studying Arabic here? Anybody? The trilateral root, right? So if you say muhasib, what's the trilateral root? Hasaba, right? Ha, sin, ba. What's the trilateral root? Ayah. So the trilateral root is alif, ya, ya, or hamza, ya, ya. Okay. Another word you get from that is ayu, which means you're distinguishing which. Ayu a'mal afdal. Which of these actions is the best? So you have a number of things and you want to distinguish one from amongst those things. Okay? So there's an idea of something being distinguished amongst a group of things. Now, when it comes to ayat, now remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He uses ayat more than He uses discursive reasoning. An ayah, which one do you think it targets? Do you think it targets this, or do you think it targets this? Which one? This one or this one? Ayat. The rational or the super rational? Think about it. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. That these are, right, in the alteration of the night and the day. Right? And these are ayat. Now, alteration of night and day, is that a discursive argument? Or is that something that's telling you to reflect upon things so that something deep within inside of you, which is not a rational argument, but it's part of your fitrah. So the ayah is targeting the fitrah. And the fitrah has a higher muqam, has a higher status than just pure rationality. There's two qualities of an ayah, something to think about. For something to be an ayah, the effect of the ayah has to be immediate. And number two, you don't learn any new information. This is the quality of an ayah. So I'll give you an example. So I graduated back in the Stone Age from Michigan State University. And in Michigan State, they give you these university rings. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like if you graduate, you can buy these rings and... All right. So let's imagine now that it's been a long time. I won't say how long. But I'm moving. I decided, I went ahead and purchased the ring, even though it was probably a ripoff, but that's besides the point. So I purchased the ring. And then 10 years pass. I'm moving. And I open a box and I see the ring. And all of a sudden, I start remembering my day of graduation. I remember walking across the stage. I remember the green robe that I was wearing. I remember the look on my parents' face, that they were proud that I was graduating. I remember the fact that my name started with a T and I had to wait for 200 people because they went in alphabetical order. I remember all of that. All of a sudden that comes out. And it wasn't there before. It wasn't until I saw the ring that comes to par. It was something that was buried deep, and all of a sudden it comes out. It's distinguished. And that's what the function of an ayah is. It takes something deep within the human soul, within the human fitrah, and it brings it to pass. So far, so good? Okay. And that is the function of ayat. And that's why ayat are in fact more powerful than just simple rational arguments. Everyone with me so far? Okay, now here's another question. Is there any use of the rational then? Use. I mean, do we say that, okay, then the rational, there's no function for it? There is. What is the function? Okay. The point is, even the rational arguments that are given in the Quran, they assume the super rational. And you want to know why? Because there's no human being that can assume otherwise. Now, why do I say that? Let me put it this way. Remember I was saying that you ask why about something. Your rationale will have you keep on asking why. Why this, why this, why this, why this. And at a certain point, you have to stop. Now, that stopping point, we said that that's basically outside of rationality. It can't be proven and so on and so forth. Now, someone may say, but you know what? I can just keep asking why. What if someone says that? I can go ahead and just keep asking why. What will be the problem there? Someone just keeps on asking why about something. Someone says a theory is infinitely defendable. I can just keep on asking why. What's the problem? He needs I was just in the UK and they told me about a Turkish slap. You guys know what that is? No, you gotta see it. Go check it on YouTube. So it's a special slap that I shouldn't be telling you this. That the Ottomans used to use. And it's an actual fighting technique that people train in. So they basically take it and they have this kind of, and that's basically a Turkish fighting technique from the Ottoman Empire. But anyways, that's a side point. Okay. Why can't you ask why infinitely? The reason is because if you say that you're gonna ask why infinitely, it means that you can't be certain of anything. Because you're always asking why, right? You have no certainty. And so the only recourse to asking why infinitely is that you say, I doubt everything. That's the only place you can go, right? Is that you doubt it. Either you say, I have certainty, but that certainty has to be outside of the rationale, or you say, I just doubt everything. What's the problem with saying I doubt everything? Or is there a problem? Then you doubt you're close. Yes. You start doubting everything. But here's the problem. If you doubt everything, you have to doubt your doubt. Which leaves you intellectually paralyzed. You have nowhere to go. So your only option is to say that there's something outside of the rationale that you cannot prove. Number one. Number two, this thing outside the rationale, it has to be absolute. In other words, it cannot be relative to anything else. Does everyone understand what I mean by absolute? It cannot be relative to anything else. In other words, whatever that thing is that's outside of your rationale, whatever you're going to hang your hat on, it cannot be mutable. It cannot be relative to something else. It cannot depend upon something else. And that's why the intelligent person is the one using his rationale understands that he depends upon the absolute. And what is the absolute, by the way? It's Allah. Allahus Samad. So in reality, when you read statements like, for example, from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, where he said that all atheists, he made this claim, he said all atheists are liars. You want to know why? It's not because he was being intellectually lazy. It's because there's no other option. Whether they internally recognize that or not, you have to have a belief in an absolute. And if you think about it long enough, it'll come to the fore. You will come to the realization that there's the only way is to believe in a fitrah, is to believe in a creator, is to believe in God. Okay? Now here's my my other point. We talked about morals and objective morality, right? Now that falls under a topic known as moral ontology, meaning what is the basis for one's morals? What is the moral anchor? And we said that the only moral anchor that you can have is Allah for objective morals, because there's nothing else you can use to justify it. If Allah is out of the picture, then you cannot have objective morals. All right? Everyone understand that point? Not you. I'll explain that to you when we get home. All right. So if that's the case, let's take some case studies. Someone comes to you now and says, look, it doesn't make sense to me rationally why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put a desire in a human being and then not let them fulfill it. What now? In other words, that's morally incorrect. So what do you do with that now? I guess based on what you know tonight, let's see how any of this sunk in or not. What's the answer? What do you say to them now? Or you say nothing? Hold on a second. Yes, sister. What's that? A test of faith. Okay, I want you to go a little bit deeper than that. The actual concept of morality, that moral principle that they're saying that it just doesn't make sense to them. What's the problem with that? Yeah. Let's say they're a Muslim who's doubting. Who's sick? Okay, but you're not going to say that to them. You're not going to be like, look, man, you're sick. Get out of my face. All right. All right, someone who's not going to say that. Anyone else would like to answer that? Yes. Exactly. Like that thing that you're saying is moral or immoral, where are you getting it from? Is it society? Because if it's society, and society can dictate what is moral and immoral, then what do you say about Hitler and Nazi Germany? Because everyone at that time thought it was perfectly okay to kill Jews. And you have to say that it is morally incorrect, objectively moral, to do that. So society can't dictate that. So where do you get that moral statement that you're making, where is it coming from? If you say that its root is from Allah, then that very same Allah has given you another moral principle, that it's incorrect. Not that the desire is incorrect, right? Let me clarify this before I get into trouble. So there's two things we want to understand. There's the morality aspect, and then there's the legal aspect. So someone that has, let's say someone who is exhibiting feelings for the same gender, is that haram? Yes, no, what do we? Yes, it is? Just having the feelings. Just the feelings. It's haram. Okay, so we have a yes, we have a yes. How many people say yes, it is haram to have those feelings? Just one? I think you're alone, and him. It's okay. Just one is okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, how many? Okay, one sister. 5. How many people say that the desire itself, Allah doesn't hold you accountable for just having the desire? In other words, that there's nothing wrong with just having a desire. Okay, you have a. So just the desire, I'm saying. So what I'm asking now is that will Allah hold you accountable for the desire? We're not talking about wrong or right. We're saying just to have the desire. Okay, let me ask you a different question. If a man has a desire, just the desire to have relations outside of marriage, will Allah punish you for that? Just the desire, not to actually do it. Okay, what about it? No, but I'm asking you, what about it? It's going to look at your heart and judge you on those things which are your intentions. Think about it. But we're talking, see, there's a difference now. this is important. I'm glad we kind of went on this topic. There's a difference from having a certain desire and Allah holding you accountable for it, and there's a difference in acting upon a desire. I didn't say the person acted upon the desire. I said they have the desire. Having the desire, is that haram? Is Allah going to hold you accountable for it? Whatever desire. You have a desire to drink alcohol, khalas. Is Allah going to hold you accountable for it? Just the desire? No. The desire Allah Azza wa Jalla will not hold you accountable for. Now here's the thing. If you act upon it, then you'll be held accountable for it. Okay? So let me ask you this. So the next question that someone would ask you is that if that's the case, I don't have control on my desire. So why would Allah hold me accountable for something that I have no control over? I have control in acting upon the desire, but I don't have control on the desire. Right? That's true. So there's a so the thing is, what we need to understand is there's a difference, and where I was going with this is there's a moral aspect to it, and then there's a legal aspect to it. Okay? So on the moral aspect, someone that acts upon that desire, yes, that's incorrect. That's haram, obviously. Okay? Have they left the fold of Islam if they act upon their desire? Oh wow. If they act upon it, they say, you know what, this is my desire, I'm going to go act upon it. How many people say you've left the fold of Islam if you act upon the desire? Nobody, I hope. Okay, no, you don't count yet. You're still not baligh. All right. So everyone agrees that if they act upon it, they still haven't left the fold of Islam. Yet they're still under the threat of the punishment of Allah. Let me give you a different example. What if that very person, they have no desire, right? They don't have this desire. Obviously, they don't act upon it, but they say that it's perfectly okay, that it's not haram. Then that's haram, right? You see, the difference is in the structure of what is your foundation. And that's what I'm trying to get at. This entire talk about what we're talking about is based on foundations. What is your foundation in terms of believing in Allah Azza wa Jal? What is the foundation of your belief? Because if you don't have this right, it leads to a whole plethora of other issues. Does that make sense to everyone? Why exactly am I stressing upon a foundational issue when we're talking about questions that perhaps you guys had related to other topics? Right? Because if this isn't right, if this isn't understood in terms of foundation, you really don't have anywhere else to go. You can't argue with the person. Yes or no? Okay. So here's the thing. What we were talking about was moral ontology. Yes. Oh, it's time for salah. Okay, let me just cover this real quick. Just 3 points real quick and then we'll finish up. And they're very important. So, what we were just talking about is what's known as moral ontology. Meaning, what is the moral anchor for objective morals? Those things that are outside of human subjectivity. Okay? We're not talking about something known as moral epistemology. Now, I know it's a difficult term, but the point is, epistemology is basically how you know what you know. It's the study of knowledge. Okay? And when it comes to actions that you do, there are basically 3 categories. Now we're talking about moral epistemology, how you know whether something is moral or immoral, versus what is the anchor for that which is moral or immoral. There's 3 basic acts, and this comes from Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. He says 3 kinds of acts. You have an act that is good or evil even before the Sharia has commanded it. So you have something that's objectively moral, and the Sharia has not yet said anything about it. Meaning, let's say you don't know. For example, the concept of justice. Even before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "I'dilu," be just, you already have that built within inside yourself. This is one category of deeds. And the Sharia comes and it just confirms what is already part of your objective morality. That's category number 1. Category number 2, that acts that become good or evil when the Sharia commands or prohibits them. Meaning what? Let's say you're dealing with yourself and you're saying, this particular act, I think it's objectively moral. But yet, you've got the Sharia that says it's not. So between the two, how do you make the decision? You go with the text. You go with the naqal in that case, right? Because even though you may assume that it's objectively moral, but you're still a human being. You still are surrounded by your society, and that society has an impact on you. So when you're trying to establish something, I think this is objectively moral, and then you have a text that runs antagonist to it, the text takes precedence, meaning the Qur'an, and that's what's established in the Sunnah. That's the second category. One more category and we'll conclude. Then there are certain acts which the lawgiver, meaning Allah Azza wa Jal, commands to see whether people will carry out His command or not. Someone give me an example very quickly. What do you think this is? Yawm as-Sabt, what else? Salah? I mean, is it time for Salah, or you mean the Salah itself? No, listen, the example of this, you know, Hajj is coming up. What is Hajj celebrating? Hajj is celebrate. Hajj. Who is the person we celebrate during Hajj? Sacrifice, right? Okay. This is where the lawgiver, Allah Azza wa Jal, has done a command, which Allah is testing the command and not the final action. This is the third category. Okay? Meaning, it's not about the moral of the act at the end, but Allah has ordered something which may be objectively immoral, and yet He's commanded it, not because He expects the person to take part in it, but because He's testing the person. And the example of that is Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? The act itself may have been objectively immoral, but Allah, that wasn't the purpose that Allah Azza wa Jal did with that act. What the purpose was to test the person. And this is the third category of acts that we have. So category number one, those things that are objectively moral, and the Sharia confirms them. Those things that are objectively, that you feel are objectively moral or immoral, and the Sharia comes with something opposite of that, and you go with the Sharia. And the third category of acts are those acts that Allah has ordered them in order to test the person without regard to whether the act is moral or immoral. And it may be that the act itself might be objectively immoral, but it's the command and the test from Allah. That's the stress over here. So far so good? Alright, now that I've squeezed your brains, right, to their core, we'll go ahead and conclude there, bi'idhnillah. And if you guys have questions, then I'll see if I can stick around afterwards. Let me just do one plug, one shameless plug before I go. If you guys haven't gotten a copy of The Divine Reality, this is written by a good friend of mine, Hamza Zorsis, and it